Ryan and Lisa on CFAX 1070.
Labor unrest in BC continuing. At least we've got a number of stories to do with union negotiations and strike votes and mediators coming in. That was the case with the 911 workers who were in a strike position. But Vince Reddy, the mediator, has been brought in to help sort that out. That just happened over the weekend. The Empress Hotel over the weekend with a deal to avert a strike there. So there's just a bunch of these stories going on. Here to weigh in, we've got the guy who heads the BCGEU, the BC General Employees Union, Paul Finch, joining us on the line. Paul Finch, hello, how are you?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm great.
Great. Yeah, we just wanted to check in on sort of just the state of labor issues and negotiations in general, and all these stories are going up. Maybe we'll start with just those two, hearing about those over the weekend. What's your reaction to the way those have both gone?
Well, look, obviously, we want to see fair deals for these workers and good deals for these workers, and, happy that they've, are moving towards resolution. We obviously very strongly support both of those groups, and we publicly and also to their employers stated that we support them as a union, of over 100,000 unionized workers in the province. But we need to understand what's happening here in BC as part of these are symptoms of a bigger problem. And what that is that the price of everything is going up because the value of the Canadian dollar has been going down and wages haven't kept up with the cost of everything. And so things are more unaffordable. And increasingly, there's a generational gap. There's a generational divide. And of course, when wealth becomes more inherited than it is earned through working, wages, the pressure on wages becomes intense, and that's what you're seeing across the province.
Now, the BCGEU yourself, obviously, you had negotiations that ended in a strike. Was that was last fall, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember the timeline. There was back in the fall.
That was 8 weeks. It started in September and went on for 8 weeks.
Yeah, and that deal that eventually was hammered out. Has that kind of played a role here at all in what we're seeing? Because it seems like a number of different negotiations are all coming to their heads now, and we're seeing that in the news over and over again. Were a lot of these unions kind of waiting to see what the big, BCGEU, you're one of the big ones, kind of waiting to see what would happen there, and then are we seeing everybody now following suit with, well, they got this, so we want that?
Absolutely. And what happened is we reached that deal in October of 2025 with the help of Vince Reddy and Amanda Rogers, both excellent mediators. And, what happened is precisely that. Actually, the government turned around and gave that kind of same deal to the Facilities Bargaining Association. And other bargaining units rightfully said, hey, we would like the same pattern. And but the whole process of resolution there got drawn out by about a year because what happens is that Treasury Board and the Ministry of Finance they basically deploy that mandate for a group called the Public Sector Employers Council, and the deal that was offered to a number of other unions, including the Professional Employees Association that went on strike with us, was significantly less than, not significantly less, so I should say a portion was less than what ourselves and, of course, the Facilities Bargaining Association, which did not go on strike and, in fact, was prepared to settle before we went on strike, was significantly less. And so, there was a gap there, and I think these other tables ended up getting what we got, but it dragged everything out for about a year. And we're still seeing, of course, some tables in post-secondary that haven't settled yet, but what that did was it just kind of delayed everything, because if you think about it, if there's a weight of public sector workers that are getting a certain wage or settlement pattern across the province and it's not dealt with in a timely or expeditious fashion, everyone else that's looking at those settlements, it's going to get pushed back. And that's really what's happened here.
That's why we're seeing this flurry of activity when it comes to labor negotiations. Hey, I got another issue I wanted to run by you, if you don't mind, because the minimum wage has obviously been in the news a lot, because last week, a week ago, June 1st, BC's general minimum wage went up to $18.25 per hour, so it's gotten up there. And it's caused, some hand-wringing from certain sectors of the business community who are feeling this is getting to be a bit of a strain on them. For instance, the Victoria Chamber Chamber of Commerce has floated the idea of, is it possible that we could maybe break this thing up a little bit? Instead of having this one minimum wage for everybody, could it be that we could, make some separate wages for people who have certain jobs like tipped jobs, or maybe for, youth, for teenagers getting their first summer jobs? Could there be, tiers of minimum wages? What do you think about that kind of idea?
Well, categorically and unequivocally, we completely reject and condemn, that suggestion. I mean, the idea that somebody can survive on simply minimum wage in this market and this economy is, in our view, absurd. And it's not that we don't have sympathy or believe we need a strong, private sector business economy. Far from it. We think that's absolutely critical, but it's the wrong medicine for the problem. And the issue here is not that wages are so inflated that people are making too much money. The problem is, and I think this is very common sense. You can walk down the street in Victoria, Vancouver, and ask anyone this. Is $18 an hour or so, is that enough to survive on? And everyone will say no. That if you look at the price of rent alone, obviously you're not getting a mortgage on that salary, but if you look at the price of rent, it's just, if you're making minimum wage, over half of your income is going to be spent simply on rent. And, I know we all know 20 years ago that was simply not the case. So the issue here is it's a fundamentally economic one. It's the value of the Canadian dollar has decreased. That has led to every major province in Canada being in a significant deficit situation. The deficit we have here in BC is not unique. You look at Alberta, Ontario, Quebec. These are shared problems, and the solution, of course, is not to pay people less and immiserate them further, and to further stratify wealth based on inheritance and land ownership, but instead to fix the economy, and that's very clearly where we need to go here.
Paul Finch, president of the BCGEU, thank you so much for weighing in on a bunch of labor issues that have been in the news over the last few days. Great to get your perspective. Much appreciated.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.